to record to the cloud, and you can hit the pause button.
Thank you so much.
All righty.
Great. So yeah, firstly, thank you so much for taking the time. Like you said, you guys are super busy, like to an unprecedented level. So yeah, I really appreciate taking these few minutes to talk to me. But yeah, I'm just very interested in fleet farming and the work you do and the vision you have for the community. So I just wanted to start out by asking you, yeah, what led you to kind of create fleet farming? What was the driving force behind like the organization, basically?
Okay. Well, I did not create fleet farming. The community created fleet farming back in, well, actually, the story starts in 2008 when Ideas for Us, the mother nonprofit of fleet farming, Ideas for Us, it's a United Nations accredited NGO grassroots organization that started on the UCF campus. Thanks to Chris Castro, who's currently the director of sustainability for the city of Orlando. When he was in college, you know, he was an activist in all these different groups and clubs that weren't necessarily communicating with each other. They were working in silos. So he wanted to bring everybody together and have a monthly, you know, coalescing of ideas. And that's how Ideas for Us started. And 10 years of nonstop meetings here in Orlando, where every single meeting focuses around energy, water, food, waste, or ecology, and we shift through those themes every month. And we highlight different environmental topics and try to align ourselves and the topics with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So having these meetings, you know, college students from all over, eventually other groups internationally started hosting meetings similarly and having that same model of bringing their community together. And then, you know, unpaid, just totally volunteers from all different walks of life. And then in 2014, we were having a discussion about agriculture here in Orlando. And we were talking about, you know, how the average plate of food travels from 1,500 miles from farm to plate and expels 33% of global emissions. We talked about, you know, the average age of a farmer being 58 years old and having to rely on migrant workers in order to, you know, maintain these monoculture farms that are devastating ecosystems, and these farm workers are living in inhumane conditions. So talking about all these things and how there's a social, environmental, and economic factor that's really about to just erupt when it comes to climate change and global warming at large. So we talked about all these themes at this meeting, and I was at the meeting, and we were like, what could we do as a community to combat all these things? And at the time, you know, there were people there that were like, I will donate my yard, I'll donate money, I'll donate whatever, my time to farm, my time to help write grants. And eventually we raised some money and had a branding idea calling it fleet farming, because we were completely focused on riding bikes throughout the community as a fleet of volunteers and farming front lawns, which are really an underutilized resource in our communities. You know, we have 40 million acres of lawns here in the US, and everywhere you see a lawn, it's loaded with pesticides, fertilizers, consumes 30 to 60% of a city's potable drinking water, and ultimately a missed opportunity to grow food, you know, where there's so much need. So that's when we started just farming and riding bikes and having fun as volunteers. And it was really, you know, Heather and Chris that started it, but I came in saying like, okay, we could keep this volunteer flow going, but it needs to generate revenue to really satisfy the model. We need to show that growing food on a hyperlocal level should be something that can compensate someone well, and, you know, should also be turning out the next generation of farmers and educating them. So I'm not the one who created it, but I was the one that saw it as a career path, and I molded it into the business model that we have today. So
I was wondering, could you talk a little bit more about the approach you take to to local farming, because I know what stood out to me was not only like your, the mobile transportation of like farms. You allow people to kind of create their own farming spaces in their homes. What kind of differentiates you from the rest of organizations that do similar work?
So there's so many different models. I don't think there's a perfect model yet. I will say that what we do is flawed. What I've seen other people do is flawed. It depends on what metrics you're going for, what data you're going for. Are you looking at how many volunteers you're bringing in and how many people you're educating, how many lives you're touching? Are you looking at just generating revenue and sustaining your model financially? It depends how you define what success is. So my model, that I kind of shaped and molded fleet farming into is more like a subscription service. Like people pay $60 a month for like HelloFresh or like a company to basically go and buy in bulk produce that's already hurting farmers, already hurting farm workers, everything I had already mentioned. And then they wrap it in plastic. So that's that's more travel miles to go and buy those. And then you're wrapping it in plastic and then shipping it, more travel miles on top of those boxed foods, right? So that's actually like the worst thing you could do is buy those HelloFresh, type models, not to call out that particular brand, but just that shipping service is the worst thing you could do. So that's one model that is like the furthest thing from what we want to do to lower our impact on this planet, right? Other farmers, they convert small pieces of farmland, or underutilized lawns or lots, and they usually try to analyze it square foot by square foot and figure out per square foot what dollar they can get out of that square foot, right? That is a traditional mindset for monoculture farming. Farmers have been trying for years to perfect going into a natural land space, clearing it completely, and then building a monoculture infrastructure of hundreds of thousands of acres of just one crop and controlling the factors so that it's as easy and as high producing as possible. So that's where the chemicals come in. How many fertilizers, how many pesticides can we put in to control the output so that we can estimate per square foot the revenue generation? We don't do that, which is why some people will say our model is flawed, because we are trying to incorporate, especially as a nonprofit, so like we get other revenue from grants and sponsorships to help sustain us, right? But we're trying to educate people on how to work with nature to produce foods in regenerative agriculture. So it's slower, which means it's not as cost effective. We don't have everything in one spot. We have small farmlets around, so that travel time to get from one farmlet to the next, that's a cost, right? And we're not using crazy equipment, to help like monetize as much as possible, as quickly as possible, the land. We're doing traditional, like we're trying to teach people how to replicate this at their homes and how to do it well at their homes. Most people that are doing it at their homes are doing it for their own food sovereignty. They're not doing it to turn a profit. And that's really how it should be, because we're trying to get people to be more resilient. So not to necessarily turn a profit, even though we do want them to have the skill sets that if they wanted to become a for-profit farm, they should be able to do it. They could just build off of our model and do it in their own way.
Right. I was wondering as well, in terms of needs in the community, what were they kind of before the pandemic? And then did those needs increase afterwards? What have you kind of observed in terms of what people are needing?
That's a very loaded question.
Yeah, absolutely. You can approach it in any way.
There's so much need. There's so much need for proper education. There's so much need for like therapy going outside just to breathe, and all the stress from social media and the news, and the need to have an outlet to calm ourselves internally. That's there, and it's real, and it's not talked about as much as it should be. Need for food. I mean, we've had a homelessness crisis here in Florida like for so long, and it's only going up like exponentially. Need for space and utilizing our space properly. That need is there. Utilizing our resources properly. That need is there. I mean, the fact that we still allow people to water lawns when our aquifers are being depleted much faster than they're being replenished. I mean, that should be illegal, but yet, we're not using our resources. So when it comes to COVID, I think all those needs still exist, but now there's an intensity for food resiliency. We saw shelves go empty for quite a while. We saw, food systems slow down. It says my internet is slow, so I want to make sure that I have a good connection. I'm going to use my hotspot just to make sure, because we have some internet issues here. That should be better. Okay, how's that? Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So now with COVID, the need is so strong, and I think that there's even more of a need for food, immediate food. I think a need for food resiliency is increased, so people are trying to figure out how they can be more self-sufficient. I do enjoy the fact that I get way more calls of people who want to lower their grocery bill and save money, and they want to figure out if there's like a cost analysis of growing your own food, but at the end of the day, as long as you're looking at food, which is living organisms that we have to grow and nurture and treat like ourselves, feed it, water it, etc. It's a living thing. Produce is a living thing. And as long as we look at it like a commodity, like a shelf or, like a fork, as long as you're looking at nature as a commodity, there's a problem, and you will always find issues. So it's just sad because right now COVID is so intense, financial crises are so intense that the conversation is kind of shifting in all these different ways at the same time. People aren't taking, some people in the most need, they're not going to have the privilege to afford the startup funding that you need to grow your own food, because you do need to put money and time into it at the beginning, and then you have people who have the privilege of working from home and sustaining themselves and having more time to be able to invest those things. So that's good. But then you have other people who have a surplus that are swooped up in like partisan issues right now that are completely numb to what we need to do to make the whole country better as a whole, right? So there's just all these very crazy conversations shifting in different homes, but unifyingly, I think there's a sense of awareness that's coming out of this. So I'm hopeful.
I was wondering as well, I know earlier you touched upon the kind of average age of farmers, right? And what it was like mid-50s or something, like
very late 50s.
Right, exactly. And they're relying on migrant workers. It's very unsustainable. I was wondering, how important is investing in young people in order to make sure that sustainable farming and sustainable farming practices persist?
That is so funny you say that. I find that question so sad that we have to ask that here in this country, because there's other countries that it doesn't matter what generation, they think investing in their people is a top priority for the survival and for the strength of their nation, for like the brand of their nation, for like the strength of their nation. Investing in your kids is you investing in your country at large in the future, period, regardless of the industry. Like we have a branch in Romania, and our Romanian branch leader of Ideas, she told me that hospital tuition all free, and if you go down a certain major that the government needs, you know, jobs that they need to fulfill that they're projecting in the future, they pay for you to have a job right off the bat. They pay for you to travel and learn abroad skill sets so that you can bring them back and get a job and help innovate within the government. They're basically investing in themselves every generation to get better and better and better, to be, not because they want to be the best, right? Their patriotism isn't intertwined in like this weird sense of like being the best. They just want to be as great as they can be and invest so that the next generation is always a little bit better. And that's why their quality of life is right on par with their GDP, right? It shouldn't just be your output, like what kind of revenue is your country making and what type of trade and what type of global leadership you have in terms of like money. It's quality of life and your people that is a standard of success for other countries. So when you ask a question like that, you could break it down in so many ways, because now you're highlighting, you're putting a spotlight on the fact that this country has been okay with letting farmers struggle and work until they're in their late 70s and barely be able to afford their own produce that they're growing on their own properties. And we've been okay for generations to allow basically modern day slavery to take place in order for us to sustain our population and for other people to maintain a certain standard of what type of food they're putting in their bodies. And they're allowing us to eat poison. They're allowing us to feed our children poison. Like, when you say a question like that, you're highlighting all that. And that, you know, the fact of the matter is, you know, young people, I work with so many young people. We have between 30 and 80 interns a semester. They feel so hopeless. They're like, man, it just feels like there's a boot on my neck. You know, this government is so corrupt. The system is so flawed. But in moments like right now, it is the pimple about to pop. Like, of course, it is not easy to wake up and look at the news every day. But we have to remember that there have been generations where a lot of corruption wasn't even making the news. A lot of these things that we're talking about right now, it's heavy stuff, wasn't making it to mainstream. It was all hidden behind a curtain, which is why it becomes systemic. So we're removing the curtain. It's a painful reality that we're so upset about, but there's an ultimate level of awareness that's taking place. So to answer your question specifically, we need to invest in our youth, period, because it just makes sense for the country. We're making it an opportunity for another global leader to rise out of the next 10 to 20 years if we don't. And then number two, when it comes to farming, like, the technology's there. You know, the revenue model, people have to eat. You have your demand. If you look at it like a smart business person and not just like a love, peace, the planet environmentalist, you look at it like a business person. It just makes economic sense to invest in technology, to invest in infrastructure, and to invest in your youth so that your GDP can go up too. This is why the lobbyists and like the people who really make a profit, like the distributors and the large scale grocery stores and things like that, they are fighting that information because they don't want that shift to happen, but it's happening whether they like it or not. They're like, how much money can I make between now and when this whole system breaks?
Right. And I was wondering too, then kind of linking to your point, I just have two more questions, but what is kind of the pushback that maybe you're facing, if any at all? I mean, it could be direct or indirect, but what what opinions or groups or individuals are you kind of trying to um, surpass, if that makes sense, in order to kind of implement your work?
Mm. I mean, it's basically a mess like everywhere. You know, it's a mess everywhere because like things are changing so much more quickly. You know, I think between generation and generation, the more that we have cell phones, the more that we have social media, things are happening so quickly. Like conversations are being had now that would never be had 10 years ago and never ever be a thought 20 years ago, right? So like it's kind of a lot of different people are trying to have conversations about innovation, like I said, and how do we solve these problems that we see. But since there's no clear path, there's a lot of people leading some of these conversations that don't know what the heck they're talking about. So like there's a lot of people that have money and influence that are like, let's invest in these big projects. They don't start small, they want to go for the big cookie. And then what happens is they waste a lot of money, a lot of time, and they end up like hurting the industry by creating a bad name, right? Or like wasting a lot of money. Um, in my opinion, if you want to put out a fire though, you can't use just one little itty bitty hose. Like you have to have a collective amount of resources and solutions in order to combat a big problem. So if there's not one answer, there's not one thing. Like fleet farming is not going to feed the world. It's not going to be the saving grace. It's going to help educate people so that they can cut some of their grocery bill needs, but it's not going to be the only thing that feeds them because we've created a monster in our agriculture industry. We need all these different changes. We need controlled agriculture. We need these malls that are going out of business to be completely gutted and turned into indoor farms that can produce 9 times per square foot than what I could produce on a small, plot. We need tech innovation. We need to look at every single space within our homes, within our schools as a growing opportunity, on our walls, on our roofs. We need to like really think of all different solutions. But money and there's certain interests of certain people who have all the power right now, have the deck in their, they have the best cards in the deck in their hands. So we have to, on a grassroots level, create a massive movement. It's not going to be easy. We need to create a massive movement. We need to work with all different groups, and we need to kind of like lock arms and help educate as many people as we can. And we're going to be met with what we're currently seeing, a very polarized kind of partisan, like weird political atmosphere that we have right now. When we're talking about something that's human issues, I mean, everybody has to eat. It doesn't matter what color shirt you have on or what you put on a piece of paper when you vote. Everybody has to eat. So like, how could this become a political issue when like literally we're all living on this planet that we're poisoning right now? Shouldn't we all be invested? So it's like ripping a Band-Aid off. We have to do it, and there's no answer, but we need each other in order to do that. So yeah.
Right. And I guess as a closing note, you were kind of like speaking in future terms. What is your vision, not only for fleet farming, but as to what you can achieve in like a time span of, the next 10 years, right? It's been 10 years since you started. What's it looking like for the future?
Well, right now, to be completely honest, I always have 10, 20 years in the forefront of my mind, but I have to break it up into like incremental change, right? Right now, we have no plan to scale or to become millionaires anytime soon. Like we're taking it 1 month at a time, especially right now with fundraising. It's very hard. But because we're all grassroots activists, we all care and we're all willing to work 4 times as hard for the very little salaries that we all have, because the more we get in the news, the more we do interviews like this, the more we're like out there doing social media, taking photos, showcasing a model that could help combat all these things. Fleet farming is not cash positive in the green every year. You know, we have hardships financially, but when you drive by a farm in the middle of a residential area, it's supposed to be a billboard of how we should be more responsible human beings on this planet. And so for us, putting that message out there and being pioneers and helping to educate other growers that'll do it in their own entrepreneurial models, that's our short-term goal, is to do it as much as we can until what I hope is some real legislation passes where, you know, people start to actually invest in more programs like this, because so many environmentalists and other leaders from generations ago, the legislation wouldn't even let them grow on lawns. They had to overcome hurdles just to get to a point where they could do what we're currently doing right now, and to even make it cool and to get young people to even care about growing and having fun and shoveling on a Sunday morning at 9 a.m., you know? So we're already at a good place. Now the future, what I hope is that we pass a huge climate bill that helps take some federal level funding and put it into small scale solutions in communities. You have to, because the more that we are codependent on our energy grid, on our food system, on all these things that are super detrimental to the planet, the worse we're going to be for future generations. And the only way to cut that codependency is to help people find a path to being more and more resilient in all these different ways. And the only way you're going to do that is with a grassroots in the community initiative. You know, you can't sit around and wait for the millionaires and billionaires that have been making money off of our energy grid, have been making money off of our food system, to just all of a sudden say, let's invest in our competition. I thought that, I mean, to me, that sounded like the smartest thing you could do. Like, why wouldn't Ford or, you know, why didn't a major like GM company become the first like Tesla electric car company? Why didn't they see into the future and create their own competition? I still to this day don't understand that. It doesn't make any sense. I think it's just mentality of like capitalism. Maybe there are examples of that I just don't know of. So in the future, I think the biggest goal is that we need to become that competition on a local scale. It's big companies.
As a closing thought, do you want to add anything? Do you want to kind of summarize anything? Like, I want to give you a space to, you know, add any information that you think people should hear.
Yeah, sure. So right off the bat, to all the people, doesn't matter the age, but particularly young people, if you're pissed off from seeing something go wrong and you're not seeing anybody talk about it, say something, you know, but please don't be like cancel culture, like combative. Handle yourself with grace and see it as an opportunity to lead people into a better educational space. Like, it's hard when you have climate grief, crazy anxiety, anger, frustration, and then you're being like force fed in social media, like a scrolling culture of like fear and dread. And, you know, it's like we're brainwashing ourselves to like have crazy mental health issues. And so I would say that just think outside the box on how you as an individual can make a change in your community, and how you can channel a lot of that anxiety and issues into like what you don't like. So for me, I try to wake up every day and be like, what could I do today that could be a little better? Like, I drive by retention ponds and I see animals living in the retention pond, no trees, no nectar, like pollinator friendly plants, no insects, just like trash. And they mow it all the way down to the water. And that just bothers me. That just bothers me, with like algae growing. And I'm just like, these animals are drinking poison. They have nowhere else to go. And it just frustrates the crap out of me. So taking my phone, and instead of posting a picture of my food in this cool restaurant I go to, I try to use my social media as a platform of education. I try to take pictures and say, this is wrong. This is wrong, and it makes me upset. Does anybody else agree? And let me tell you, sometimes I don't hear anything. Sometimes I don't see comments. Sometimes I don't get that like scratch of like, you did good, girl. Sometimes I don't get the likes. Sometimes I don't get the private DMs, but I don't do it for anybody else. Like I do it for me because I need an outlet. And I think that I'm tired of hearing silence when it comes to these issues. I don't see anybody else advocating for like urban animals as to the extent that I think they should. And so like, I think other young people, they feel like a lot of pressure to be that voice, because everybody right now is super scared of being like not politically correct on their terminology, and so my first advice to you is to be that voice, be courageous. If somebody called you out for using the wrong word, or then just apologize and be like, I actually really had good intentions, and I didn't mean to say it that way. So I'll make sure to be better next time, And then for the other side, if somebody does do something wrong, don't come for somebody else. I don't like people that see you with a water bottle, and then you're an environmentalist and somebody else is like, look at her, she's a fake, like, I just think, when somebody asks you, maybe, not to flip it back on you, but if somebody asks you about your hijab, right? I think that there's an opportunity for it to be an uncomfortable, but a very educational and informative conversation, because people want to learn. They want to know about you. They want to know about your culture. Some people just outright have never maybe even seen somebody like you. And they might not know how to be sensitive and ask properly, tell me about your culture. They might say something that comes off a little rude and abrasive. But right now, we're so quick to be like, how dare you? You asked me about something that is so personal. And so it's like, how are they ever going to learn? Yeah, they might come off a little ignorant, but see it as an opportunity to educate them so that they can be better to the next person they meet who's like you, right? I feel the same way about the environmental movement. People are so quick to say, oh, Ideas for Us doesn't have enough people of color on their team. You guys aren't as socially aware or something like that, Nobody's ever asked us what ethnicity I am. Nobody's ever asked anybody on my team so like, where are they coming from? They're just looking at skin tone. Like half of my team is, Hispanic, but they're white passing. So, people might automatically assume things, and it's very hurtful. You're not, think about how you're coming off, even though your intention is to be a social activist and to make sure you see representation in your community. Watch how you talk to people, and let's be nice. Let's be kind. Let's see it as an opportunity to like educate one another. And like, if you don't see something you like, approach it in a much nicer, calmer, kinder way, so that together you can see those changes. And if somebody's not receptive, then just don't waste your time. Move on to something else that you can influence. You know, I think that's part of the problem right now. This is one of the fears that I hope, because it's so tense right now, that people will get sick of it, and then people will just become nicer. Because like, I know in me, I go to the grocery store, I try to be smiling and be like, good morning, you know, because God only knows, you know, people look soulless right now when you go out in the community. And it's our job to influence one another. We are all connected to nature, to the air, to the sun, to each other. So if you walk around with a poor attitude, you're rubbing off on other people. Even animals can feel that vibe, you know, and it's synchronicity. You know, when I go outside, the birds fly so close to me, the insects fly so close to me, and it's because I go outside, I release my energy, and they feel calm around me. I can be this close to a dragonfly and it doesn't fly away. You know, lizards literally walk into my hand, because we are symbiotically related. And when you talk to other people about that, because we've been so turned off internally and emotionally for so many years, people think, oh my goodness, it's witchcraft, it's voodoo, this girl is crazy, or it's religious, she's being religious, you know. And it's like, no, I'm actually speaking on like a sixth sense that we actually have. Our intuition, our empathy, it's actually like a real characteristic that if you learn how to like practice it and exercise it, you can be a better person, and other people will treat you better, and you'll go further in life. So
Right.
I'm done preaching.
So the key words here are tolerance, understanding, empathy, right? This is how we're supposed to, or at least it's best to approach issues that way.
I mean, imagine if we gave degrees for empathy.
Oh my
training.
God.
Like, what kind of world would we live in if we could really look at someone and feel them without really talking to them? Being able to read people's circumstances, you know, if somebody comes off at you and yells at you, instead of wanting to rebuttal, look at them and be like, what are they going through at home? I feel really bad for them. How can I help them become calmer through my actions? Life would be so different.
Oh yeah, we would live in heaven. Like we would all like be healthy. Like I feel like everyone has like mental health issues and like anxiety. Well, not everyone, but like a lot of people do. And if you're just more empathetic, we could break so many barriers we put up, you know.
And yeah,
Like,
and then it seeps into everything else. If we start to treat ourselves better internally and mentally, we start to treat each other better. That means we're going to want to invest in ourselves, invest in what we eat. We're going to question what we put in our bodies. We're going to question who's running our country. We're going to question, you know, what we see in our community when we see sexism or racism. Right now, all the fear and anxiety is a perfect tool for corruption, because it's a distraction.
mm-hmm.
You know, when you're battling so much, you can't go out and organize a beach cleanup and bring up and take photos and bring up how messed up it is that Coca-Cola continues to put their product in plastic that'll never ever biodegrade, right? If you're not battling with your tuition, with your family struggles because of how polarizing conversations are in the household, if you weren't losing friends due to like what they're posting on social media and Twitter, if you're, you know, all these things are so heavy, and it becomes too heavy for you to actually be able to like stand organizing your community and going out there and like fighting, right? It becomes another thing to do, and it's so hard, which is why young people right now are stepping up, because they have a little bit less on their plate. They don't have kids usually, they don't have a mortgage, they don't have a family to take care of. So like they're a little bit more free to like be like, oh, I'm going to spend my Saturday afternoon canvassing. because I want to see some damn change tomorrow. They have like a little bit less pressure to make those changes in their community. And that's how it really should be, because all these older people that are kind of complacent, they're not going to be around when our sky is on fire. They're not going to be around when all the bees are gone and we can't pollinate our food enough to produce anything. You know?
Yeah,
And the
absolutely. It's
only,
our problem. Yeah.
yeah, the only people that can afford food are people who can afford to pay like $20 a pound for something. You know?
Exactly.
And that's not okay, right? So we have to sing it on the rooftops. And you know, regardless of who wins the election, nothing's going to stop. It's not like all of a sudden the sky's going to open up and the rainbow's going to appear. Like it's not going to happen, right? So
Right.
it's on us no matter what.
Exactly. Well, the sound bites I've gotten during this time are amazing. So there's nothing more I could ask you. But yeah, do you have any questions for me before we kind of like wrap it up, or?
Questions for you. Yeah, I mean, what drives you in the morning when you wake up?
Ooh, feels like an interview. No, yeah, I mean, like when like to keep it short, the reason why I was kind of like so attracted to your concept was just because just given my like origin, so like I'm Moroccan and I'm Colombian, the sustainable farming practices, I mean, it's part of our history, right? I mean, this is what we began with and this is what worked, and then kind of everything disintegrated when we started going mass scale. Culture started disappearing, languages, you know, weren't spoken, everything was homogenized. So when you look for a solution, often you have to look back, and so that's why your kind of work speaks to me. So when I want to choose stories to cover for either like school projects or just for my work, I always kind of look to people who have that same, or who at least have an understanding that to go forward you have to look back.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
So yeah, you guys are doing great.
That's awesome.
Great work.
Like we should be celebrating diversity.
Oh yeah.
You know, and celebrating culture. I think that there's nothing more beautiful than someone who's not like me, you know, because I can learn so much. And I think that the root of everything is fear. You know, the root of everything is fear of scarcity. That's how farming became as bad as it is right now. The fear of the racism is fear. It's fear of somebody different that we don't understand. Just like you're scared to go into a dark room because you don't know what's in there. You know, it's, you know, people who are racist are afraid of what they don't understand. You know, so you can't even really take those types of things personally, when at the end of the day, it's just they're human beings that have flaws, you know, and your flaws are just different.
Exactly. I mean, if Fleet Farming has therapy sessions, I will literally go to any of them, because this has been like not only like a great interview, but it's like, oh my God, like it's been like relieving.
I hope that we
but
can share this across everything, because you know, one of the things I want to invest in, and maybe you can be my partner in this if you're interested, but I really want to do open conversations like this, because I think everybody needs to hear some of these things.
oh yeah.
And I'm thinking about just starting to go Facebook Live for no reason, you know, and just having conversations with people and just talking and seeing what people say, because I think there's a lot of built up pain, and you know, and I think that if you hear things that you need to hear, it releases like a lot of that.
Everything just comes out. Like if you give people the opportunity to talk, like they'll just like, you know, just like completely open up. It's like kind of beautiful. But yeah, like honestly, the combination of like sustainable farming, organic food, and like therapy, this is what we need. So if Fleet Farming, or if you want to do that, like I'm totally supportive. But But yeah, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I know you guys are busy changing the community, so yeah, I'll leave you to it. But yeah, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation, like for journalistic purposes, but also for personal purposes. So
Oh, yeah. Anytime. Keep my number.
Yes.
And definitely let me know if you need anything else. And for those of you who are watching, fleetfarming.org is the spot to go if you want to learn or get involved. We're empowering people to grow food of all generations. So please be a garden hero and just put a seed in the ground and mess around, and don't beat yourself up if it doesn't survive. Plants die. It's part of life. Don't say you don't have a green thumb. I'm tired of people saying that. You do. You just need to learn incrementally.
Exactly.
But yeah, thank you so much. And I am going to stop recording.